Hi, everyone. Welcome to our discussion of Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, also known as Blade Runner. I don't know why. I read the book twice and I don't know why. Uh,
Mm.
and this is going to be the fourth book that we're reading in our SF Masterworks reading series. We read one every month, except when they're really big, we break them up across multiple months, like we did for Cities in Flight. Uh, this is the book is by Philip K. Dick. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. With me, I have the usual group of friends. Chris, would you like to start us off with introductions?
Me, God, you caught me on the bounce. My name is Chris Mullen, sometimes YouTuber, but mostly just kind of do chats like this about this book. And I have to say, this is of all of when we first thought about the series, I hadn't long finished reading this the first time, and I was like, I can't wait to get to this book. So here we are in
Nice.
November, before the end of the year, talking about it. So we'll see.
There's a lot to discuss for sure.
Yeah.
Robin?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Robin from Bookends and Biscuits, which is a YouTube channel. But yeah, a lot of the time I just spend talking to really awesome other people like these guys. First time I read the book, loved the film. So yes, very interested to see the how everyone thought they compare.
Susanna?
Hello, my name is Susana Imaginario. I'm a writer and I run a YouTube channel called Den of the Weird. And I spend a lot of time talking about books, and movies, and stories in general, thanks to the page during forums.
Nice. And Jared.
Hi, I'm Jared. I run the Fantasy Thinker YouTube channel, and I also haunt the page chewing forums, and I write a blog on there called Creative Crossroads.
It was a lot of fun. And we have a brand new guest today, Livia.
Yay.
Thank you. I write text-based interactive fiction. I have also written books, but they are not published yet. And I also have a podcast called Books Undone, mostly to analyze books. And I'm also a member of the Page 2 forum and have watched your YouTube channels for a while. So it's an honor being here. Thank you.
Awesome. So we'll kickstart the discussion. I guess what I'd really like to talk about is to start talking about is the mood device that also has a setting to make you want to dial it. So what did you guys think of that? I thought that was fascinating. There's a lot of like interesting tech. I've only read two books by Philip K. Dick, and both of them I thought have a lot of interesting seeming tech. And yeah.
Someone who likes the book, please go first, because
If I may, yes.
Yep.
Something that I quite liked about the mood organ was at the start of the book when the wife, Iran, she's saying that all the apartments are empty and it's so common that she kind of like lost the ability to feel anything about that. So she gets into a depression mood just to not forget and still be able to be empathetic. And that made me think of how often something happens so repeatedly, so often that it becomes common and we stop having feelings about it, positive or negative. And I thought it was quite interesting, not the fact that they were inducing that mood of depression, but that she was actually aware of the lack of feeling, right, about it. And afterwards, she says that the way of getting out of it was using awareness of the manifold possibilities open in the future, as if hope and having something to wish for are the way of getting out of that depression she induced. In general, it was quite an interesting opening for me, especially because it sets the mood of a world as well. It's so empty, so desolated, but it becomes so common that nobody thinks of it.
It was fascinating to me, I have to say. Completely fascinating to me, especially these first two chapters. There's so many ideas of the way like a dystopian society would operate or could operate. and taking like this one, this emotion box of the idea that, okay, I wake up in the morning and I want to feel insert emotion. Therefore, I will use a device, in this case, a technological device, but in some cases, it's also sort of drugs induced to kind of regulate their emotions or their needs. And this, and in his wife's case, Rand's case, she wants to wallow in this depression. She wants to live there permanently, maybe as a consequence of the world that they live in, the kind of the not wanting to live in that world, as I think the book sort of explores as it goes through. But that idea that, okay, we'll just go with this. But even stepping forward to that, like, you can't help but read that and then look, right, what's the equivalent in our modern society of that? And I would say for our lot, it's that dopamine hit that social media and all that kind of stuff kind of gets, is nearly an identical thing than what Dick represents in this book.
Yeah. Like, especially the dial 3, was it 3, to make you want to dial. Like, you get notifications all the time if you want to delete. It's like, are you sure you want to delete your account? And so on and so forth. I also thought the wake up every morning, the alarm setting to make you feel joyful to wake up, that was interesting. So yeah.
Wish I had that. Yeah, that'd be great.
I was watching a YouTube video by someone, what every guy on YouTube versus me, and then like, everybody has a school morning routine, and then like the person's just lying in bed, switching off their alarm 20 times. Anyway, anybody else have anything?
It's a fascinating concept. The mood stabilizer, or what the mood machine there. It kind of, if you have that kind of mood regulation, that kind of machine that can kind of do that kind of thing for a person, it just makes people not that much actually closer to androids in a way, because they're just being regulated in that manner. Whereas an android probably has, artificial intelligence way to regulate itself. And I thought that was, that was the beginning of just a lot of the comparison and contrast in this book between humans and androids that I really enjoyed. And I love the emotion right away put into non-human things in the book, especially like the very first line, where he gives, a emotion to electricity. The electricity is merry. It's a merry surge, and it's like, well, that's a human perception of electricity, but it's right off the bat, he's crossing the lines, really, right there.
Yeah.
I loved the beginning. Yes, the concept of the empathy box. I was like, oh, this is brilliant. This was not in a movie. It's always very exciting, and I had high hopes. I mean, like Chris said, the first 2 chapters are amazing. It's like, wow, this is mind blowing, and then it was a steady decline for me. It's just kept getting consistently worse. And I didn't reread. I kind of skimmed, tried to understand, why was it making me feel this way. I have some ideas, but the start, that whole concept of that you can fix your emotions or choose your emotions. I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah. I think overall, my favorite bits of the book were all this exploration of what's real and what's not, what's human and what's not. And I don't know that this is explicitly discussed, but like, can you allow yourself to have the arrogance to decide what's human and what's not when there is so much that you can't figure out? Like when Isidore, like, sure, he's a chicken head, quote unquote, but he can't figure out whether that cat is real that ends up dying on his hands. And what's his name? Deckard's neighbor didn't know that his sheep wasn't real. The owl, they couldn't tell if it's real. There's just so much going on there about and I'm using the word real sort of loosely here. They are real in that they exist. It's just they're artificially produced. So there's I really love that exploration, and it feels like it's something about our world, right? Like how we are so ready to deprive people of their rights because we think that some people are better or worse or less deserving and so on. So it feels like that theme is really woven in quite a bit into the book, and I really appreciated it for that.
One of the things that really strikes me about that whole idea that you've talked about there, Varsha, is the fact that whether something's artificial or real, they have to do the same things anyway. So the thing about the sheep, the sheep that he has that's artificial and not real, he has to care for it as if it's real because he has to keep up his perception that
Right.
it is real to everybody else. So in a lot of things in this book, it doesn't matter whether it's real or artificial because the end result is exactly the same as society. How they contribute to society and all that kind of thing is identical. So actually it becomes this misnomer as to how real or artificial something is.
And I found that's a fascinating point, Chris, because I found it hilarious that even in like this post-apocalyptic time, people are still worried about what their neighbors think. And I found that ironic as hell.
Why?
That's the primary moving concern. And there was what is it? It was, oh god, I forgot. But never mind. But go ahead. Olivia was saying something, I think.
Oh yeah, that I think that it ties back to what Jarrod said at the start, that even the emotions can be real or not, because if you are inducing the mood, is it truly real that Iran is feeling that depression, or is it not? And if it is induced, what is the difference to an android's feelings, because they are induced as well? And as you mentioned throughout the book, towards the end, we get more interaction from with the androids, and they all have feelings. And is it real or not? And even one of the bounty hunters ends up questioning whether he is an android, because the difference between quote unquote real and android is so blurry.
Mm.
Found that very interesting.
Yeah.
But that's sorry.
No,
Like I
go
say,
ahead.
but I was just going to say that part of that whole keeping up with your neighbours and part of the show is to show that you are real, isn't it? It's all about having the empathy and showing that I'm human, I care for something else. And that's why I was so surprised. I was not expecting the level of animals in this book that there were. I really was quite confused by that. But again, it links back to the whole thing of you have to care for animals because it's empathy, and if you haven't got empathy, you aren't human. So that's where that all links in together, I think. So it's all about putting on a show just to show how human you are compared to these androids.
Yeah, but it's also shallow. It
Oh,
didn't
God,
really
yeah.
care about when especially when he got the goat. It didn't care. It just cared about showing off the goat, and then you just left the goat there. And I was like, "What are you gonna do? You're just gonna leave it there on the roof? What the hell?" Every emotion. I sometimes question if they were feeling it or if it was just they just wanted others to kind of see it reflected on them. And the test, I mean, the psychologist in me was cringing the whole way through. This is not how you measure empathy at all. And I guess it was deliberate. There was a point where I was thinking, well, everyone apart from Isidore is an android here because there's no real empathy going on at all. And I thought that would be, the genius of the book. Even the writing, and that was what got to me and why I didn't enjoy it. I thought it was poorly written. It is a bit clunky at parts, but it wasn't that. I was feeling very uncomfortable reading it because everything was so shallow. There was never a moment of introspection, a moment of let's talk about what just happened, of reflection. It was just reaction, projection. And that made me very, very uncomfortable just reading that so shallow. So yeah, that's upon reread, just to try to make sense. If that was the intention, brilliant.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, Susanna, as an observation, because I've read a couple of Dick books now, and I feel like he doesn't do that in his books. Actually, explain what he's thinking. I think the point and the reason his books are kind of so short in general is because he kind of wants you to kind of put your own stamp there on what does that actually mean. I think he purposefully doesn't do that. He just gives very, I think, simple examples. If there was a criticism I would have of this book is that he sort of beats the same point over your head multiple times, if you know what I mean, in terms of like how shallow they all are at the end of the day. Like he does it like that's kind of nearly everywhere. And in fact, the only point of real empathy in the entire book is probably Isidori with the spider. I mean, that's probably the only point of the entire book that's a real emotion that has been manipulated or moved upon. That was like a gut reaction from Isidore, and yet he's the guy that's excluded from society just as much as the androids. You know, he's basically living in a commune or out in the sticks somewhere, whatever way you want to call it. You know.
Something that I wanted to point out of Susanna's comment is that that test I do, it doesn't really measure empathy. And that's true. To me, it was actually measuring more culturally appropriate responses, because at some time they asked if the guy, it was about having a dish with oysters. And right now, in our current world, like half of the population probably will be unfazed. The other half, if you are vegan, will probably be annoyed. And depending on some of every reaction was on animals. There was one with a bearskin rug in the couch, and my reaction was like, okay, fake. And I didn't even pay attention to it. I thought that the rug was fake. And then the character explicitly says, oh, she didn't have any reaction about the bearskin rug. But it's more of how you look at it. If your culture is different, then you are going to have no reaction or a very different reaction. And that doesn't mean that you are empathetic or not. It's just like, as you were discussing, they are all shallowed down to a single interpretation of a word, to a single culture, right? And that's why, in theory, the test works, not because they are measuring empathy as well. And I think it ties up to that shallowness that they reflect. Something that actually struck me is that Rick Deckard, the main character, he doesn't even reflect on the past. He doesn't seem to have a past. He never goes back and think like, oh, this happened to me before. Like, no, the only past that he thinks of is what happened at the start of the book, that he got notified that another bounty hunter had this and that. And it feels intentional at some point, as if part of demonstrating that shallowness as well.
Yeah, I think there's a certain lack of world building here, because you got to remember that it's a post-apocalyptic world, and so I think animals might be rare, and that's why they're using them as that guide stick for empathy, because I think they're really hard to get a hold of, and they're not as accessible as they used to be in ancient times. But
that's not empathy, that's status.
Yeah, I think it's supposed to be an empathy for a life type of thing, rather than a not, I mean, and it is a status symbol too for rich people to have these things that have actual life. But I think that not seeing it, it's not very well explained in the book, I don't think.
No, you are right there. It's an empathy for the waste of life. So the bearskin rug would be a waste of a bear. The oysters, how would you even eat them, because they're alive and they're an animal and they're not around anymore.
Right, yeah.
That's kind of how I read it as well. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say.
Near the end, they actually mentioned that they have empathy only for organic things, and even for the plants. And then the androids go like, what about us? Because even the chicken heads, or there is another person called Angel, they are not really explained. They are even worth less than androids. They are human, but they are not allowed to marry, not allowed to reproduce, and so on. And even when the androids talk to this person, to Isidore, they even ask, he's like us, society doesn't care about him, doesn't care about the androids. So they are pushing that empathy only for some organic things, the animals, the plants, humans that are above those quote-unquote animal heads.
Kind of the same point I was going to make insofar as the joke of the book is that the one human trait, empathy, if they actually showed it, they actually wouldn't be excluding anybody from society. They would find some way to integrate androids into society, to integrate specials into society, and therefore the point that they are using to differentiate themselves from everybody else is the one emotion that they do not ever explore or show in any way.
Yeah, that's a great point. It contradicts itself, right? Just by existing, it contradicts what it claims to distinguish. And yeah, I really appreciated the chicken head was the only empathetic one, or at least he wanted to go be friends with his neighbors and so on. Um, he is intellectually lesser, apparently, which again could be some arbitrary test that we aren't really familiar with in the book. I don't think so. For all we know, it was a test that didn't really distinguish intellects versus not. But given that he's not allowed to be part of human society, even though he's very much possibly the most human person in the story. So that is really interesting too. Yeah.
I mean, I had this idea that was written in 68 or something like that. So a lot of the things that they're talking about there, one, are couldn't be more relevant today. But even things like, if you look at neurodivergent people in society, the very one thing that they're supposed to lack as well in terms of ability is empathic nature as well. Some people to lesser or greater extent. But again, that could be a criticism that you're busy shunning and stripping society out of the diverse range of society and sort of trying to create this Aryan race. As that's why I just kept reading that kind of really every chapter, insofar as they were basically trying to create society into basically being all the one type or being all the one thing, which is what you do when you're threatened, I suppose, in some way, or trying to curate society or feeling threatened by it. So
yeah, I guess one way of looking at, so yes, the test separates from like distinguishes people, or they have all these tests that say whether or not someone's human, whether or not someone can reproduce, and so on. In the case of the android test, well, what Deckard is trying to do is kill people for killing their owners, so to speak. Right? So it's a bit like killing slaves for escaping their slavery, assuming if they have enough sentience and self-awareness to say, I don't want to serve this person anymore, like you are lacking in empathy in doing that, right? So that, I guess, was another parallel, so to speak, with slavery.
If I can take it a bit further, there is a part towards the end when one of the androids, she's playing with a spider. The spider is an actual one, and she starts like snipping the legs of it, and that triggers the whole scene with Isidore. And after when I was reading the book, I was like, "That's awful. How can you do that?" Even if I'm in Australia, we have some ugly spiders here, but at the same time, I thought it was quite a childlike reaction, like toddlers, very young. They don't have that understanding of that's an animal. They will slap a cat, and they don't do it because they are mean or not empathetic. They do it because they don't know anything better, right? So up to what point is empathy learned and based on the norms of our society, or is empathy just something that we have naturally, right?
Oh, it's definitely learned. We were born like sociopaths. That's why the kid will slap the cat. It needs to be learned by example and by experience. Babies, they don't care about anything but themselves. When they're gonna eat next, and we were not born, that sociable or empathetic. But it is a good point. Like she was learning how to care, how to understand that different being. Yeah.
I think I agree with the learning thing, because even if you think about it, as you were saying earlier, the different cultures have different reactions to different foods, or how we eat foods, or what animals you eat. Some people will be outraged by eating dogs or whatever, and some people that's normal. So it's completely learned, and it would have to be something that was kind of, if they were trying to ingratiate, I guess, picked up on as they go forward.
True, yeah. And he also, I mean, that kind of brings up the question, like, because how do you detect when something's artificial? when it looks and acts so real. And that's part of what that machine, the empathy testing, was supposed to do. But I mean, obviously, it's not even perfect in this fictional, science fiction manner, and it would, of course, it wouldn't be perfect in actual life either. And so I think that's the question that he's probably playing with throughout this book here.
But hypothesis. So, because you couldn't tell the humans from the androids, and the humans created the androids, and the humans clearly had no notion of empathy at all. So the androids were just, how they were created. So the I think what you need is a little bit of backstory. What happened before all this? How did humanity got there? I think we
Absolutely.
just got a glimpse.
No, yeah, that's one of the things I struggled with this book, is actually that you were just getting this. I was like, I want to know more about what's happening on Mars. Like, are the androids fine on Mars? What's their life about in there? Like, what's happening? And beforehand, and obviously there's a whole thing about how people aren't even meant to be staying on Earth. Like, they're staying there against the general consensus that they shouldn't be, which I guess would be hard to give up on. But yeah, that's one of the things I struggled a lot with. It was the fact that the book was so short and you only got this like tiny bit of information and far too many animals.
There was one bit which for me was the most empathetic bit in a way. It was at the beginning. I think it was Pris, when she was describing Mars as being dead, that you could feel that it was dead. I think it was one of the few characters that actually used the word feel or expressed something in those terms. And, she was an android. And kind of got me thinking. And I thought the book went in a different direction, and then it didn't. But yeah, I still don't get what the author was trying to do. Maybe just endless discussions like this. But I still think the problem was from the beginning lack of empathy. I mean, that test, I know the book was written in the 60s, but even back then, the test itself, yeah, it was making me cringe. Don't know why. It was almost obvious it was testing the opposite. It was testing the learning empathy, as if empathy was something that you would kind of study, and then you'd have, I should feel it for this and that and the other, and in these circumstances.
Yeah.
Nothing was natural or remotely human about it. So, yeah.
I did really love the reaction when he went to talk to the opera singer, and she was just like, "This is a dirty test. This is all about pornography and women." And I was like, "Do you know what? She's not wrong."
Yeah. Even when the other woman, she asked the question like, "Are you asking me a test, or are you asking if I'm homosexual?" And it's like that, because the question was very weird.
Exactly.
But do you not think that's kind of the point of the test, if you know what I mean, is that it is designed to test empathy, but it's written by humans in an almost machine learning like way. In fact, they can't define what empathy is, therefore they can't write the damn test to do it. And like the androids are just trying to pass the test. So when they get the new iteration of the Nexus robot, they're like trying to test the old test to see if they can beat the new test with the new technology. And it's just like us trying to sit and somebody produces a piece of writing going, was that written by AI or was that not? I mean, it's exactly the same argument. Same with the art that you see that's being produced. It's exactly, I can tell this is AI art because the edges are too sharp at the side here. I mean, I know it's written 68. It's psychologically not a great test, but it's also very accurate for how we as humans try and define what technology is. I just think that the whole thing was just like 1968 kind of look at 2023 society in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah, I think I did read it as the test being deliberately shallow or not very interesting. I don't and I think that sort of became clear to me the second time I read the book, not the first time. I think the first time I was like, okay, that's interesting. That doesn't really work for me. I don't feel like we should judge based on just these criteria. But given what I know about all the things that the book explores, I feel like that might almost be deliberate, especially in the context of Isidore, the chicken head, who is arguably the one who's most fit to be accepted into human society, but is not. This feels like a similar statement. Like maybe the test that he took was similar to this one, where we're just like arbitrarily almost just discarding people and saying you can't be a part of the society, and the punishment is death or just complete segregation from everything.
But you look at Deckard's faith in the test. I mean, there's a whole section around chapter 68, somewhere around that anyway, where Deckard is like, well, what if this test doesn't work anymore? Like the whole society is going to fall apart because this test is no good anymore. And even when the Rosen Foundation kind of fool him by saying, well, no, she's actually human, and he goes, oh, the whole game's up, until he realizes that actually, you know, they had lied to him or otherwise. And it's like almost his faith has been restored. Then it's like, oh, okay, everything's all right because this damn stupid test passes a litmus test of detecting what it's meant to do in the first place.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry. Oh, thank you. So even in that scene before that, he's actually discussing with his boss and saying that some people will not pass the test because of mental health, because they experience empathy and show empathy in a different way. So as a baseline, we already know that the test doesn't work and it works only on neurotypical people. And that's very interesting because in a more abstract way, it poses a very nasty question of, are they real? Are they human? We know that they are. We know that they are equally valuable, but the test makes it seem that they are not. So that also, it's very... I thought it was cringe when I got to that realization while reading, but then it seems to be what the author was intending to put up because it's very organized. You get a discussion and then you get, oh, but it's going to fail on androids, right? So...
It brings you back to the question of why are they hunting down these androids in the first place? What did the androids do? How did they turn on their masters if they did? And what led to the development of they created this test for a reason because they wanted to find these androids and stuff like that. And I think it was mentioned somewhere that the some androids did turn on their owners. Okay. Yeah, but so there's a fear there that these androids have to be destroyed, these particular ones. So that that leads to the creation of the bounty hunters and the test, however faulty it may be. So it seems like they don't have a better recourse, I guess.
Yeah, and that they explain very little that they supposedly killed their owners but it's not very clear. It's very vague, and that made me think of, when has humanity not killed each other? Like we have wars. Like I remember I read in another book like there had been only 300 years of human history without wars. So it's like we kill each other in a regular basis. So how can you then hunt the androids based on that? Right? Well, we put up different penalties for humans. Why we can't put up different penalties for the androids? Sorry.
They're the new other. They're the new threat.
Exactly.
If it's post-apocalyptic, you imagine that there's a lot of humanity is probably not around. And whoever is left on Earth, they're subject to these like radioactive landscapes and what have you. And so they're the new other. They're the new thing to point the finger at, to put your blames on and stuff like that.
And without that, humanity can control its rage, basically. So
yeah, you're right.
I agree with that. I thought, but at the end, I was just like, I don't really understand this whole hunting of them either. Or because of the other and nothing else. But they set up all of these bounty hunters and everything else. Did they only live for 4 years? I was like, surely just wait. They're not going to be around that. There's a lot of effort. They're just kind of hanging out in the Badlands. Like, it's 4 years. Not that long.
It does make you wonder, because to create something that is so close to human that the only way that you can tell is by testing the bone marrow or something, and you make it so short-lived, and even so you spend a lot of time and resources going hunting them. If why? What brought this about? I would love to know that.
That's a
It
good
makes no
question. Yeah.
sense.
But also, like, I feel like I'm just thinking of this now, but is it also a bit of commentary on like what we like as humans? Because see, they did say that the company, I forget the name, started making these more and more realistic androids because they were selling better. Like each time they came up with a better product, like it was because of the demand from the market. And so the people who were moving to Mars, they wanted these human servants or human feeling or human looking servants to take care of them, like because you could easily build something that's visually different and has metallic parts and whatnot, and do what you need to do to make the difference obvious. But apparently humans want the human looking servants, it seems like. At least that's the implication. I don't know if it's deliberate. um
That's a good point.
Humanity has form for this, though. Like in this case, it's androids for sure. But bees, flies, spiders don't live very long. They're hunted relentlessly by the human race as an inconvenience. It's just a nature
Yeah,
of
but
human
they
society that we are
reproduce.
threatened by them.
But they reproduce a lot. The androids do not. So
that's true.
I don't,
Yeah.
but I don't think it's the fact that they reproduce a lot until I find like a nest of spiders in my house, and then like honestly, the fear of God has descended upon me. It isn't until that moment that I go, oh my God, they're going to reproduce. It's just death to all spiders. Before that, it's just.
Yeah. I spray my
I
yacht
think
every year,
that's
and those mosquitoes keep coming back. I don't know why.
I think that Chris made a point there. It's about the fear. We fear the spiders, therefore we kill them. They fear the androids, therefore they kill them.
That the robot revolution will take over the world. Interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
and they killed one, so why wouldn't they kill more? Supposedly.
But that's the thing. When I read that line, because it is literally just a line when they talk about Roy Batty and them just killing their masters in Mars. Like, you think, what narrative purpose has that got a sense? Because I think that is put in there so the reader goes, oh yeah, okay, they're justified in killing all the androids. Then just that from that one line, the reader goes, they're justified. But again, that raises the question of, even if there are some bad androids who do commit murder, you can't. It's not enough to label an entire race or an entire kind of thing to say then death to them all. Because of the actions of one or two. And again, there's any amount of examples that over history as well.
I forget. Was there some equivalent of emancipation papers where like the owners could tell the androids you're free to go? Was there something like that in this book, or am I imagining it? No. Anyway, like they don't actually do any research to figure out if they did the murder, right? They just assume that they're on this planet and not on Mars, so they must have killed their owners. They don't do any investigation. It's just, you exist here, so you need to go. Yeah, they aren't getting any rights, any due process.
wasn't Rachel free? Maybe I'm confusing.
No, she was
She-
referred as property, actually.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
Property of the company.
Yeah.
Because she was seducing, and we have to talk about the most lackluster sex scene in literature ever. Just why? Seriously, talk about lack of empathy.
Well, it's funny because before that happened, when he was talking about Luba Luft, he said that that android had more vitality and desire to live than his wife did. And then later on, he was talking about the how because she's in an opera or a play or something like that, and the opera and the play, like as an actor, you have to like not tell the truth and lie, and stuff like that. And he found it ironic that the android could hardly tell the truth anyways, because it's an escaped android, so they couldn't tell the truth about themselves for fear of being caught. And so he makes all these almost emotional connections to these androids that he's hunting down, And then, of course, then further on, he makes a real emotional connection, so to speak, with Rachel,
Mhm.
the android from the company.
And is that relationship any different from someone who just doesn't love you back? You know,
Was
Right.
it an emotional connection though?
Well, it was.
Yeah, it seems just sex, honestly.
It wasn't even. It was just kind of like, we're both here. It was not a good. I agree with you. That was a terrible, terrible sexy.
Let's get on with it.
It was like,
iPhone
well,
was
we're
very
already
glad there was
here.
no sexy time. The point about that, though, I think is interesting, is that for all of the advances in technology, all the advances and everything else came on, at the very base way to manipulate somebody is through sex. I mean, it's pretty much the thing that people have been doing in humanity for eons and eons. And actually, the androids had worked that out themselves, that actually this was their 9th one or something that she'd done this with. In order to gain sympathy for androids, she had basically been going around sleeping with all the bounty hunters, and it had worked with all but one, which again showed you that was by far and away the most effective approach that they had to be able to do it, is to create attractive females who were sexually active, which is kind of very sad indictment on society in its own right as well.
Which is also interesting because they understand humans apparently a lot better than humans understand themselves and humans understand androids.
Well, the company does. They're programmed by the company,
that's true.
right?
Yeah, I suppose the company does. Yeah. I suppose those are the people who really know everything about human psychology. And yeah, it is that conversation in the very beginning where Deckard tells the owner that you could be more responsible. You could make sure that you create tests along with the new androids that you create, which, spoke to my software engineer heart, but also this it's like, yeah, you're not really being responsible. It's like you want these androids to not pass those tests. I don't know if there's anything to read into that, but that was just interesting. Why would you? Because apparently the outcome is shut everything down if it turns out that they don't pass a test. So why wouldn't you also, if you're trying to make them more real or human feeling, why wouldn't you also make the test simultaneously?
I thought something similar. I also have a software background, and when I read it, it reminded me of currently in AI, when you do sentiment analysis, there are some specific metrics to measure it, and they are still trash. Like, you can still get a very high metric, and it can still be overfit, right? So it's like we have been failing at testing what we generate for so long, and it also made me think of how software can be so unpredictable as well in some behavior. Same thing with the androids, right? But humans can also be unpredictable. So it goes back to that thing, that theme that the books goes of: is it real? Is it not? How much it takes for it to be real, and what's it mean to be real?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it's almost like the scientists going, "We can, so we shall. we can make this more."
And also, people want it, we shall sell it.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's true.
But that was the again, I think, a very minor point when the cat was brought back and he thought it was artificial, is it dead or not? And when he brought it to his company, they basically make the point that if it's close enough, it's the same. From a transactional or capitalist point of view, if I can give you something that looks like a real cat, the person might believe it's a real cat. And as long as that's the case, we're in the clear. We don't have any problems going forward, which I thought was quite interesting.
I sense that in this future post-apocalyptic society, some of the rules are a lot more lax than they would be today. As far as creations, and like you said about backups and being able to detect what you make and stuff like that.
That's true. A lot less regulation.
Lossless, a lot fewer ethical applications and analysis as done right now. Yeah.
Now, one thing that bugged me throughout, well, one of the many things, but this one. So that TV show, I've been trying to remember the name, that everyone was watching. that
Buster.
always had.
Westworld? Was it
No,
Westworld?
no, I'm talking in the book.
Oh, okay. Sorry. That.
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
The talk
the
show,
Bucker
that
White.
everyone. Yeah, and it was on by like 23 hours a day, and it was always the same guest. And did that at any point raise any flags, questions? How, it was just there, and no one. We were hunting androids, and there was this thing on that never repeated. It made the point saying, somehow the conversations, and it never repeated. And what? Please elaborate. So I was waiting for an explanation, elaboration, and nothing. Was everyone oblivious that clearly they weren't humans, or that wasn't real, or what the hell was going on? What is your interpretation?
I think it was that they didn't really care, because the only person that actually poses those questions is the quote unquote chicken head. Like the other people, they don't really care about that show. They don't put up any questions about it. And he's the only one who goes with all those questions. And I thought it was quite rhetorical for the reader to actually realize before it is presented on the book. So that means of to what ends are, to what extent are we willing to go if we just want entertainment, right? They create the androids as entertainment, as basically slaves for them, servants, and then they create them for the show as well. So
Yeah.
that is how I read it. Yeah.
I thought it was kind of an interesting metaphor for the TV will rot your brain kind of attitude they had back then, because TV was the internet of today, basically,
I think it is
Little,
again alongside that other stuff with his wife and the kind of way she'd plug in the emotion box all the time to switch off to regulate her emotions rather than have any real experiences. It's the kind of how soulless and lifeless humanity's existence is going forward, like on a day-to-day basis. There doesn't seem to be any like drive of industry. There's no drive of anything going on. We basically the only characters we have are bounty hunters and some police and that kind of thing. There's nothing else going on in society in a post-apocalyptic world. So like, is humanity just dead at that stage? And the fact that there might be a 24-hour TV show, I mean, in that case, I might just watch YouTube all day as well. Just nobody else,
Yeah.
I agree. It didn't describe it. Like, what was she doing? I guess she was being a stay-at-home wife, but like it made it very much seem that that's exactly what everyone was doing. You're right.
Yeah.
They weren't doing anything else. They were either on their emotion box or watching this awful TV, or not looking after their many animals. Like, it just wasn't. Yeah, you're right. There was nothing else to that world at all.
Yeah. There was that was a great metaphor for TV, but also now for AI generated content that, apparently you don't need people to write stuff for you anymore. You can just go infinite scrolling on social media. But I mean, it was very obvious to me the second time I read it, but I was trying to figure it out the first time. I did wonder if it's more ambiguous than it seems. Like, for instance, we only have Isidore's perspective telling us that nothing ever repeats. So maybe he hasn't noticed that it has repeated, or it's from like, if it's been on for years, they're replaying something. But yeah, that's just like a very mild point of ambiguity. I think overall on a reread, it's pretty clear that they are supposed to be androids producing content.
And what about Mercer? And then especially towards the end, just I threw the book across the bed. It's like, okay, I'm done. Why, please, someone explained. I even went online to just please explain this to me, and I found a few theories, but I would like to ask you guys, because that caught me almost completely off guard. I think it just derailed. I didn't see any foreshadowing, any reason for ending the way that it did. Maybe I'm just dense and I was tired by then, but it just why.
Are you talking about the reveal that Mercer's essentially made up? Is that okay?
No, that he was thinking himself upset at that point, and he found the toad and the whole thing.
Yeah, that was a little weird.
But at the end,
Yeah.
Yeah,
I-
it just came out of the
both,
blue.
yeah, both times I read it, I still think that bit's clunky in the book. I don't think there's any doubt about it. I think he was trying to use it as there's no established religion creating the morality that would have been in 1960s society, and so this replaced it. And all it seemed to do in the book was create this again moment of crisis for Deckard and others, basically saying, well, if this isn't real, then where's our moral center? And as long as people could be fed a little bit of a lie to say, oh, don't worry about it, everything's fine, they'll go, okay, we'll go back to the Mercerism, and this kind of metaphor of struggling up the hill and getting hit over the head with a rock or whatever it was, that catharsis we're going to do. People just wanted to believe in something, there was some sort of direction in life. But I do agree, it was extremely clunky both times. I thought the second time I read it, it would make a lot more sense. But I got exactly the same thing out of it the second time.
I came up
Oh,
with a
thank you.
theory about it. I read it and then came back to it, and my idea was the following: if everybody is so dead inside because they don't think of the past, they don't think of anything, then and the only actual human experience they get is through that empathy box, then it makes sense that Deckard actually has no sense of identity.
Mm-hmm.
And the only identity he can actually get is that of Mercer, who is a person that links them through it. So it's not like he becomes Mercer. He thinks that that's the only way for him to be human, to be real, and have empathy after everything he went through, killing all these androids that perhaps are not that different than us, right? I thought it was a bit convoluted. I'm not quite sure or sold on my own interpretation of it, but I was kind of like trying to make sense of it.
Yeah. The note that I had in my thing here is that the Mercer box is a bit like social media today. Like when social media goes down for an hour, everybody runs about going, well, I don't have justification for my own opinions. Then it's that joke or that thing that's on the thing says, this news just broke, could I have your immediate reaction to it? And the guy says, well, what's somebody else saying about it online? And it says, well, nobody's heard it yet. You'll be the first person to have a reaction. He says, well, I'll wait until everybody else has their say, and then I'll tell you what I think. I think it's kind of that idea that Mercerism was kind of driven, because they were crowdsourcing emotional thought, if you know what I mean. They were kind of experiencing each other's joy, each other's pain, each other's depression through that kind of vehicle or technological vehicle to do. And without that, they kind of were like, oh, I'm gonna have to have real emotions, I'm gonna have real empathy again. This idea that humanity is lost in an emotionless society without kind of aids, whether drugs or technology, do that.
Okay.
Well, to give a little bit of history, because it says Mercer had told them that the year empathy boxes first appeared on Earth, had told them that you shall kill only the killers. So that was his his big commandment, I guess. And then Mercerism then evolved into a full theology. The concept of the killers had grown insidiously. And in Mercerism, the absolute evil plucked at the threadbare cloak of the tottering, ascending old man, but it was never clear who or what this evil presence was. It goes on a few more lines like that. So that was near the beginning of the book, and so does what's his name now, Bounty Hunter? Decker. Is he then later on in the book kind of emulating those thoughts, those kind of ideas? Is he having some kind of toad vision?
Yeah, the toad just came out of nowhere.
But there also seems to be no government and no other direction for humanity again. I mean, it doesn't seem to be
Exactly.
like anything that's doing them. So it seems to be Mercer or nothing,
Yeah. Police, pet shops, not even like restaurants, any other shops. I mean, how do people, get their furniture, their food, the whole thing? Like it reads like a first draft at points. I thought it was very lazy. I don't know. Continue.
I want to hear in detail about the parts of the book that didn't work for you. But before we move on from the topic of Mercerism, I Yeah, you compare it to social media, Chris, but I and I agree with that. But also, the other thing that I thought it was very similar to, it's just like religion, right? Yes, it is a religion and a faith and whatnot, but one, how it excludes if you don't have an empathy box, and you have to prove that you're a better practitioner by like showing off that you take better care of your animals. Like there's a certain amount of um, what do you call performance, I guess, to some aspects of like the organized religion. So it felt a bit like that too. Like it is explicitly a religion, so like that comparison's not really like uh clever or anything, but it's it I feel like it's making a point by not being one of the real world religions, if that
Mhm.
makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the entire book, and maybe others didn't read it this way, but I think it's a takedown of capitalism and far right society. Gone mad actually, and a lot of those ideas and the control, etc., that's going along there. Again, this fascination with status in a world where everybody's dead. You know
Mm.
what I mean? There's nothing but space. There's like they're trying to control population when there's nothing but space around the world. Yet there seems to be like this push of right, kill all androids. We'll exclude the specials from this as well. Like there's no reason for population or otherwise to do that, but they are going to do it anyway.
But
Yeah.
but the population control, I think, and the chicken heads is actually an outcome of the radiation, isn't it? So they say that the loss of IQ and the fact that they couldn't have kids, they weren't saying that you couldn't do it because of whatever. It was because you had been infected or you'd been irradiated, so that maybe your sperm, whatever, with the lead cod pieces was no longer viable. So I think that wasn't necessarily them going, you're not good enough. That was them saying, you've been irradiated, you therefore can't have kids.
But
So
isn't it the same point as I Am Legend then? Where at one stage who is the monster and who's the it's again that same point. Yeah, but you're right for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it does also like that makes sense, but is it also a sort of exaggerated metaphor for, I forget the name of the thing, but where was it eugenetics, where you chose the genes that work and are good, and only those people are allowed to procreate.
Gattaca.
yeah, but also if you're medically, if you've been affected by radiation, that's not them choosing to
That's
not.
true.
It's more of a you've been damaged, I guess.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Okay. I'd like to hear from you, Susanna. What parts didn't work for you? I've been eager to hear that all afternoon.
Well, I used to read a lot of drafts and manuscripts still on. I used to be a beta reader, and it kind of read like like an unfinished manuscript throughout. Apart from the couple, the first two chapters where it did was polished and it felt like it was going somewhere, and then it was a steady deterioration of in plot and character and everything. And I mean, it had to be intentional to some degree. I mean, the book's been around for so long, but and also there were bits that made me quite angry because it was so arrogant. Because a book like that today would not be published, and if it was self-published, the author would not hear the end of it. So that was a bit frustrating, and it was frustrating to read and just try to understand the story when there was so many gaps, so much missing. And there was no background, no structure. I like to fill in gaps, don't get me wrong, but it was a bit too much. That with the story itself, with the lack of empathy throughout, it was a very unpleasant read. I don't have no way to put it. It wasn't difficult, it wasn't strenuous, but I felt very unsatisfactory. I mean, it didn't work. I was always with a sense of, dissatisfied. Yeah, I think it's the best way to describe. I felt like I didn't quite accomplish something. Not even to reflect. I didn't went away to reflect upon the story. I was just trying to, understand what I just read as if it was homework. But I mean, brilliant concepts at the beginning. I know it is a post-apocalyptic set, but I mean, I would love to have like a whole building to myself, and the next door building on the other side. I mean, that sounds great. I mean, just the amount of space, so much that could be done. I don't know, and people's motivations and goals were just so narrow in this big space. Which I thought it was very interesting in the beginning, and so much to work with. Brilliant idea, but it wasn't developed. It wasn't fleshed enough. So usually movies, they tend to be disappointing compared with the books. In this case, I think the movie was so much better. If that was what they had to work with, brilliant. But yeah, that was my rant about the pros and just the execution of the idea itself. I think it fell short.
What was better about the movie Blade Runner?
Well, there was a lot more going on. For one, there was actual plot. I think made sense. I do think it's an overrated movie. Apart from the ending, which is one of the most brilliant scenes in cinema ever, and I think the whole movie was kind of carried on just that scene. But seriously, compared with the book, with the source material, yeah, they did an amazing job. No, even the test was better. Just the same.
It's curious.
Yeah.
I like both the movie and the book, but I definitely agree that if they tried to make a movie of the book, it would have been terrible. Like this book as a movie, just I don't think would have worked in any way. And they basically took the bits that they thought were the big questions out of the book, or the bits that they liked out of the book, and decided to develop that in some ways and kind of go along again. Sort of come to the same idea that it's about empathy and what is empathy and kind of how can you detect empathy, what is life and all of that kind of stuff, but kind of arrive in a different place and put it on. I can understand why somebody wouldn't like, because all Bill K. Dick's books that I've read have been like this, just 200 pages of ideas or 150 pages of ideas, and then a book's over. There, you're done. There's not really anything to pull it together after that. But sometimes I'd much rather read the 200 pages of ideas with nothing else to go off than and try and build a plot around it for another 300 pages and then going, oh god, whatever. But I do accept that it is cold. There's no doubt about that. Like, and for a lot of people, that's not what they're looking for. No reason.
Was it? Sorry, go ahead, Livia. Or Robin, I don't know.
So many people meeting at the same time. No, I was going to say, I think one of the main reasons I liked the book was because I liked the film. So like I was really enjoying being like, oh, that's kind of where that is, and oh my god, that wasn't in it at all, and everything else. But I don't know. I think the film I watched when I was younger, in like my formative years, so it's got that kind of like nostalgia for me, and it's really, really good. And cinematography, it looks like the whole how it looks and how it's done is really good. But yeah, I think I would have struggled more with the book for sure had I not enjoyed the film. I think so. Yeah, because I agree, it's a lot of ideas, but I think a lot. I've always said that with the Sci-Fi Masterworks, is one of my main issues with these older books is that it's all ideas, not much else going with it. Yeah, for a lot of them, that's why
that's completely fair.
It's par for the course as far as what we've read so far. That's how it's been, pretty much.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I
kind of
sorry.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Livia. Yeah.
Sorry. So something I really didn't quite like in this book was how women are presented. It's like it's a speculative fiction, and can you please speculate about society as well, not only about technology, But it also makes a point of they are discriminating about everything. They are discriminating about a specific group of people, the animal heads. They are discriminating against the androids. Why not women? It's something humanity has done for quite a long time. But for example, the sex scene with the android, that was like too much object on one side, a woman made an object to the extreme. I thought, I understand perhaps what the author tried to do. I just think that he could have done it in a more elegant way, trying to strip, the sexism out of it and make it more part of a plot so that it feels more plot and something related to it than a mouthpiece. And there are other books that are, I think, a bit better at speculating on society, but the message on this one is quite dooming of humanity will always be humanity and within the same parameters, and yeah, that's, I think, the thing that I didn't like. And regarding the movie, I watched both movies. I love them both. I think that's why the book didn't rattle me that much, but I think it's a book that needs to be put down, taken again after a few days, so you can just go and, I don't know, see it with another light, perhaps.
Definitely with the what am I trying to say? My brain. The part about the sexism also. Did anyone else? The one that I highlighted on this was when he was tuning the mood box for his wife, and then saying that it was tuned to, about what was the actual? I can't remember what the actual wording was, but how that she was like thankful for being a wife or something.
Understanding for the husband's infinite wisdom or something like that.
Yeah.
It was very, and it was quite mocking as well at the same time, but it was annoying.
Exactly. I love the way she's like, I dialed out of that immediately as well. Soon she, but, note point to say as well that the film was bashed as well for that terrible sex scene in it with Decker. That was also not done particularly well in the movie. So
that didn't bother so much. The one that annoyed me was, so his wife was depressed and dealing with her the best way she could, and his excuse for going and buy the goat and spending all the money and the implements was his answer for his depression was to get them in death. And she was like, well, okay, I'm happy you got it. Yeah, I'm just going to leave it there. That whole scene, the amount of WTFs and Fs that went around when I was reading.
Yeah, it's like they spend the whole book talking about empathy, and then they just go and make the most irresponsible thing of getting an animal on a whim.
Yeah, because it was his answer for depression. It was because I need to show this to my neighbor, because now I got this, and now I'm not depressed anymore. And I just
it's that weird hierarchy, isn't it, Susanna? Of like you can have a sheep, but an owl's like way better than a sheep, and then they get like a really rare goat, and then he might have found a frog, and like a frog would be like the best thing. It's like when your kids say,
but it's just and not to be the opposite of misogynistic. I forgot the word, but it is kind of the way I've sometimes men deal with depression. Is they go and spend and buy stuff, and women just have to remain depressed and drink or whatever and be happy. And I'm so glad you got that. You're feeling better. Yeah, that's great. It's just
See my midlife crisis car.
Yeah.
I've seen the error of my ways. I'm taking up drinking. I'm banned. Nothing else.
Yeah, I've read one other book by PKD, and there is I think the best word to describe it is bimbo. There is a bimbo character there too. Like there's someone, big-breasted female, whose apparent role is to just confuse the male protagonist, which is what Rachel was in this book. And so I want to read more of his books to see if that's like a general running theme he has going. That was also one of the reasons why I came up with my theory about like really poorly written, over-sexualized female. But I don't think that's really a new thing, right? It's just something that was written about a lot, at least in the 60s and 70s. So anyway, yeah, if you've read Ubik, there was a character in there too that I did not appreciate at all.
Ubik's coming up in our rotation, although I have to say it's one of the parts of the SF Masterworks I'm really worried about long term is that I do not expect very well written female characters very much throughout this whole period. Like that is something that I'm sort of quietly dreading.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just have sort of resigned myself to like, roll my eyes and move on. Although sometimes it's difficult. Like I against all of your better advice, I am still continuing on with Cities in Flight. And my
Why, Vasha?
God.
Why?
Why?
Levels of masochism.
Oh my God.
Why? I'm just going to be Susanna for a moment. Why? Okay. There was a couple of things that I wanted to bring up. So in the very beginning, at the end of the first chapter, he just basically tells you everything that's going to happen in the book. Did you guys notice that? I noticed it on my reread. What he says, it says the bounty from retiring 5 Andes would do it. He realized
Oh, yeah.
$1,000 a piece over and above my salary, then somewhere I could find, and then blah, blah, blah. He says the main bounty hunter needs to go out of commission and they all need to move into this location in Northern California. Like it just, so I guess you don't care about plot that much because you're just telling us all of it now. Now let's go off and explore the idea. I thought that was funny.
I missed that. I'm glad that I missed that because otherwise I would have been even more upset.
And then the other thing that I wanted to talk about was in Isidore's introduction, when he describes the silence, I thought that was so beautiful. How he talks about how, well, the summary is that the silence is really loud. It's a big paragraph, so I won't read it. But I thought a lot of the descriptions of silence, of the quality of silence that they have to deal with now that everybody's moved out, I thought that was really beautifully done. Yeah.
Yeah, he did
I
have
think
quite a few good passages where he was,
yes.
when he described the world,
Mm.
and it was like made it interesting, and it made you want to discover more and read on about the world.
Yeah.
Until like you said at the very end, we got into the Mercer head, and then it was a little wacky then. But there was some good passages in here. Some brilliant points in here.
Yeah, he didn't. So, I mean, I guess maybe it's my reading of Malazan and now Backer that's influencing this. But like, I would like more like spend time on fleshing that out. But I think these SF Masterworks, like, they're so short and they just present an idea and like you do all the thinking that normally maybe in recent times a character would do that for you, sort of. There was one other thing. So to your point, Susanna, about the large buildings and all the empty space that you could do a lot more with, I wonder, yes, it is fairly narrow, but also I'm thinking this, everybody who's left behind on Earth, they're sort of just dealing, right? They don't want to do anything more. They're sort of like humanity as a whole is depressed, if you will, because they're not the ones who are going out and looking for a better life. They just want to do the best they can with what they have left, which would include like not trying to go and sort of fan out and do more with the space they have. It's just like, oh, I just want a semblance of my old life back. At least that's how I'd read that. But yeah, it makes sense. Like, I guess there's 2 ways of looking at that as well, maybe more. Is there any
Not
other?
true.
Yeah.
I think the only other point that I wanted to bring up about the Isidore, the chicken head guy, wasn't it? Well, he's talking about the silence was also, I really loved the discussion. I know apparently it was from Mercer religion, but about the kibble, about the slow takeover of all the stuff. And I just thought that was a really interesting idea, especially because like when you're in your house and your house slowly gets more and more untidy and you have to keep over it. But the idea that was like a religious thought,
Yeah.
I just thought that was really cool. And how like at the end of things, kibble's just going to take over everywhere when everyone's dead. So I thought that was beautiful. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I wrote down a note against that passage that this is the excuse I'm going to use with my husband when I leave plates lying around and they magically multiply overnight. They just doubled overnight. I had nothing to do with it. I didn't like snack at midnight and leave them lying around.
We should all try that.
Any other closing thoughts before we call it done?
I did like there was an observation that Decker made later on about how he didn't like the way the androids gave up, and that was the difference between humans and androids in his mind at that point, was that humans had billions of years of evolving, of trying to survive and that fight to survive, and androids hadn't had that. And that was like part of the reason why he won that final battle with those androids, was that he had that survival instinct and they didn't. That was one of the differences, that that was actually more telling than some of the empathy testing he was doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, self-preservation, because we will do quite a lot of things for self-preservation that the androids don't seem to have. Even the gun scenes, the gunfight, it seemed like so easy. Like they wouldn't fight back. And the first one, it kind of rattled me, but after that, I reached the same conclusion, that it was because the androids didn't really. They saw that they had lost, that the probabilities perhaps of success were low. That's it. They didn't try it. So that's why the gunfight scenes were so simple in general. But it's like the whole book is always discussing that. And I think it's, as Robin said, one of those books that you read a bit, that's it, do a lot of thinking. It's not written in the page.
You think that I'm not disagreeing with you. I think that is a very good point. I also saw it as well. The android didn't have. First, they didn't have to grow, but also they knew they were much more aware of their own mortality and their limited time, and just that their existence was disposable and short-lived. So they were a bit more pragmatic about death. Oh, it's here now, but I knew it was coming inevitably. And humans do that, have that. Sometimes it's not so much a survival instinct; it's more a denial. And even because the way they were living, I know they were just making do with whatever they had, and just showing off their pets. But yeah, that wasn't. There was no sense of self-preservation in the way they were living. They were just denying death. I don't know. It works both ways very well. So I just didn't see it that way. And just
Well,
adding.
denial is very powerful, and that very well could be part of, tied into evolutionary survival. Who knows?
And do you think the
Yes.
androids were programmed to not want to survive? Because if they, because the circumstances in which they might be hurt, other than like a really abusive master, is like if they were potentially like the reasoning could go that they have become dangerous, so
It could
should
be,
be easy to kill them.
it could be programming or a lack of
Mhm.
programming, maybe.
Yeah.
That
Yeah,
they
that's
didn't
fair.
have something.
They wanted to live. They wanted to live more than the humans wanted to live to some degree. That's why they left. That's why they rebelled, and they went looking for something better.
Yeah.
And then, oh, oops, it didn't work. Oh well.
Indeed. And another very bleak outlook at human future, even after an apocalypse. Can't get the shit together.
Yeah, exactly.
Seems reasonable. Any other thoughts, or we can do outros? I don't know why I said that like it's the most exciting thing, but Livia, would you like to start us off?
I never done this before, so I'm not sure how you do the outros.
Oh, so you say basically where people can find you, your content, your books, your apps, etc.
Oh, for sure. So I'm here in YouTube. My podcast is here on almost every other platform as well. I have Twitter, Instagram, and Threads, all as Livia J. Elliot. And you can also find me on Google Play. So that's the app where my text-based interactive fiction is. So yep.
We can go clockwise. So Jared.
Okay. Once again, you can find me at the Fantasy Thinker YouTube channel, and I'll be lurking on the page chewing forums all the time, so you can find me there.
Mm-hmm. Page chewing as well, or Den of the Weird, or on X as Chronodendron. You can find my books everywhere. The first one is only 99 cents now on Amazon.
And it's called Weird Gods. The
Weird
series
Gods,
is
yes,
called
it helps.
Timelessness.
Thanks, Bart. You can tell that I am great at this. Yes.
Yeah, I finished the first book and the second book is going great. I have listen to the audiobook if you
Amazing.
like audiobooks because the narrator is brilliant. Cool. And also I forgot to mention I loved Livia's Unearthed story, so check those out. And
They're
Thank
really
you.
good.
Robin, you're up.
I have no books, but I think I will pick up these two guys' books. That sounds very exciting. But yeah, on my YouTube, Bookend Biscuits, mostly sci-fi and crime, and I am also on X as well and on the page trading forums.
And me, I have a YouTube channel that's mostly talking about movies at the moment, so maybe not going there for book content at the moment. But we've got top 10 lists coming up in the next month, so you know that'll
Nice.
be. I'll do one of those for sure. Otherwise, you can find me in the Patreon forums. Yeah, that's it.
Cool. You can find me on my YouTube channel, Reading by the Rainy Mountain. I hang out on the Patreon forum all the time. You can message me there if you'd like to try to if you'd like to try to reach me. The about page has other ways to reach me if you don't like that. If you would like to join us on these discussions, either here on the actual discussion or on the forum via text discussions, the next book we are reading is The Stars My Destination by Alfred Baxter, right? Not Baxter. Alfred
Bester, Bester.
Baxter, right. So The Stars My Destination is the next book. We're reading one of these every month. So if there is one or more you're interested in joining the discussion for, please consider joining the Patreon forum. And we'll see you in a month. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.
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 Bye-bye.